Peace, family. It's Bakari Lumumba, the proprietor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, and I'm here today to discuss four keys to what it means to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's life and legacy today in the 2021. First and foremost, I have to state this. I would be remiss in my duty if I didn't state this, that we can't mention the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. without first mentioning Coretta Scott King, because we believe in duality. We know that in ancient Egyptian mythology, the Ankh teaches us that you can't have life without both male and female energy present. So we want to shout that out. But first and foremost, the first key is we have to be cognizant that we do not reduce Dr. King's legacy to a legacy of what? Love and having a dream. For example, when he gave that seminal speech on the March on Washington in August of 1963, yes, he talked about having a dream in which his children would be able to play with white children, that they wouldn't be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of the character, which is laudable. However, he also stated that we haven't written a check that was deemed insufficient funds due to the fact that we didn't receive the 40 acres and a mule that was promised to us doing Reconstruction. So Dr. King advocated for reparations. Dr. King also understood that when he met with the city fathers, when they founded the Montgomery Improvement Association in the mid-50s in Montgomery, Alabama, at the meeting with the city fathers, he saw that they would not move from their rigid focus on segregation of the buses and other public accommodations in Montgomery. He said that this is not an issue of morality, this is an issue of power. And so many social theorists argue that we have to bridge the wealth gap, which is true between Black people and white people, and that we have to bridge the empathy gap and the care gap and the justice gap. But I believe the most important gap that we must bridge is the power gap. I believe in the teaching of Dr. Amos Wilson, who taught us in his seminal text, Blueprint for Black Power, that the biggest issue that Black people face throughout the world is not lack of economic resources, not a lack of financial literacy, not a lack of education, not a lack of social cohesion. The primary issue that we're facing is a lack of collective political, economic, social, and militaristic power. And as a result of this lack of power, this is why we see issues of police genocide. This is why we see issues of miseducation. This is why we see issues of food deserts, lack of adequate health care, et cetera, so on and so forth. So I think it's very important that we understand that Dr. King's legacy was so much more than a simple quote of, I have a dream and let's love everyone. Dr. King stated that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Layman's terms, it means it's absolutely nothing but a bunch of rhetoric. Number two, when discussing what it means to celebrate Dr. King's life and legacy today, I think it's very important that we realize that Dr. King was a revolutionary. He challenged the government, right? He didn't believe in the politics of symbolism. He believed in the politics of what? Getting substantial benefits for our community. For example, in March of 1957, Dr. King and his acolytes found themselves in Accra, Ghana, not by happenstance, but because Dr. King stated that he understood that the Ghanaian government, the Ghanaian people's independence from the British Empire, as the first African country, sub-Saharan African country to gain independence from colonialism, was tied to Black people, not only in America, but throughout the world, gaining their independence from white supremacy and domestic colonialism. So I think it's very important that we understand that he was a revolutionary. He also spoke out against and challenged the American government's imperialistic wars, particularly in South Korea, which of course was in the 50s, but even Vietnam that was taking place during King's time. So I think we also have to understand that Dr. King was a revolutionary. He did not believe in the politics of getting along simply to play along. And then number three, I think one of the things that we could learn from Dr. King was we have to engage in the political process. I know a lot of people argue that we shouldn't engage in the political process. And I understand how people feel about, hey, I don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils. I get it. I wouldn't vote for the lesser of two evils either. Evil is evil. One bites you with a ground, another bites you with a smile, but at the end of the day, you're still being bit. But one of the things that we did learn from Dr. King was the importance of independent political organizing, right? Registering to vote in the Mississippi Delta. One of the things we did learn from Dr. King was that, according to Dr. King, politics was the business of who gets what, when, where, and how, meaning what? The distribution of resources. We all know that for Black people living under the system of racism and white supremacy, we suffer from a maldistribution of resources that goes all the way back to chattel enslavement. So, as a result, I think it's very important that we take that time to understand Dr. King's engagement of the political process and then organize independently of both the Republican and Democratic parties so that we can gain the political and economic power that we need to insulate our communities and empower ourselves from the vicissitudes of life here in America. And then last but not least, I believe this is something that really gets looked over when we talk about the life, legacy, and work of Dr. King, and he even talks about this in his autobiography, is the importance of economics, right? We understand, and when we look at the great line of Pan-Africanists and Black national leaders in America, there was always a focus on being economically independent. And in Dr. King's last speech that he gave in Memphis, Tennessee, where he's known for saying, I've seen the mountaintop. I may not get there with you, but I've seen it. He also stated that we need to be economically independent. And he implored the Black congregants that evening to take their money out of white banks and put them into Black banks so that we could fund our actual revolution and build the type of communities that we want independently. So just real quick, we're going to wrap this up. 4 steps and what does it mean to celebrate Dr. King's life and legacy today? Well, actually 5, because first we want to make sure that when we mention Dr. King's life and legacy, that we mention not Winnie Mandela, but Coretta Scott King, because without Coretta Scott, I don't believe that he would have been able to have the faith and the power to do what he was doing to actually bring the resources that he felt were necessary for our people. But number 1 is, of course, understanding that Dr. King's legacy is much more than just love and a dream. Number 2, he was a revolutionary. He understood, he viewed things actually you can argue from a Pan-Africanist frame of reference due to him celebrating and understanding the importance of the Ghanaian independence in 1957 from the British Empire. And then number 3, engaging in the political process, independent political engagement in the individual political process. And then last but not least, focus on economic empowerment and economic development so that we will be able to be independent of the white power structure. One of the things that we actually saw with the SCLC and even SNCC was that when they moved from being completely nonviolent to advocating Black power, they actually lost their funding in less than a month. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Till next time, peace.